Welcome everybody to Trapped in the US. This is KB, your host. Today is October 27th, 2023. I want to welcome you to the podcast. This is actually episode 1. Woo! I'm so excited. It's taken me so long. I know I shouldn't have waited, but I just can't take it anymore. There's so much urgency in the air. I just got to be obedient and put this out. So the basic concept for Trapped in the US podcast is to describe what the mindset is like right now for the typical average American in this country, facing all the challenges we are facing, all the events unfolding before us, and how did we get to this point? What direction is our country heading towards? And how do we prepare for the future? Right now, things are not looking good for America. Things are not looking good for the world. It seems like every single day our country's falling deeper into the abyss. And Americans right now, if you're an American living in America right now, you are literally trying to figure out, what am I doing? How do we proceed forward? And how do we plan for our futures? And how do we plan for our children's future, plan for their college? And listen, right now we're walking the line, working our jobs, trying our best to pay our bills as best as we can. But at the same time, we are seeing World War III manifesting right before our eyes. I mean, we already have 22 days going on right now with the war with Israel and Gaza. And you got all these other countries surrounding it. You got Iran, you got Syria, you got Iraq, you got Egypt, you got Jordan, you got Qatar. You have all the Palestinians right now are literally trapped in Gaza, and we are witnessing the literal slaughter of men, women, and children, innocent civilians, Palestinian civilians in Gaza right now with no place to go, no place to escape. 7,000 plus citizens have been murdered, and half of those deaths are children, and it's absolutely tragic. Everybody right now is just horrified by what's happening in Gaza right now, the Palestinians. But it started with Hamas attacking Israel on October 7th, breaking down Israel's defenses somehow. The Mossad didn't either catch it coming, didn't know it was coming, or let it happen. I don't know. But 1,400 innocent Israelis, men, women, children, families were killed, butchered, horrifically taken hostage. And Hamas took all these hostages back into Gaza, and Hamas hid all these hostages into these tunnels under Gaza City. And this situation is falling apart hour by hour and minute by minute. We're also in a war that Russia and Ukraine are in right now. It's been going on for over a year. And you got Zelensky, who I think is probably the greatest salesman in all of politics, who has taken hundreds of billions of dollars from multiple countries all over the world to try to fight Russia. And Russia has been holding the line, and they have been successful in holding back at least all the offenses so far with Ukraine. But that's been going on since April of 2022. And like I said, today's October 27, 2023. And right at the point where Ukraine is seemingly reaching the end of their rope, they've used all of their resources, and they're running out of options. And now Hamas has attacked Israel. Israel's attacking Gaza City, and it's inflamed the whole entire situation. I mean, we are looking at World War III. We're talking about potential nuclear war across multiple countries, potentially hundreds of millions of lives being lost right now, today. Meanwhile, in America, 350 million plus Americans right now are trying to navigate all of this stuff that's happening, and it's driving some people crazy. While at the same time, it's scaring a lot of people. There's other people who are just burying their heads in the sand and pretending like nothing's going on and everything's well and it's all going to go back to normal one day. Keep hope alive. How do we move forward? How do we plan for our future? How do we plan for our children's future? I mean, are they going to college or are they going to be drafted and have to fight in this war? I mean, it's already happened in Russia. They had their conscripts. It happened in Ukraine. They had their conscripts. Shoot, they ran out of men and they started conscripting women, even if you were pregnant, and children. And then here in Israel, they called up the draft and all the reserves, hundreds of thousands of reserves just got put on duty. And we're blind to think it's not going to happen here in America, okay? So we're not going to go into all of this right now, what's happening today. We're going to spread it out over 2 or 3, maybe even 4 episodes, lay some groundwork. And I'm going to take it all the way through World War I and II, just touch on those moments. I'm going to go into JFK and his assassination in Vietnam. I'm going to go all the way, speed forward to September 11th, 2001. I'm going to go into right after Barack Obama, Donald Trump coming into office, and what it was like for all of us Americans going through the horror of just the literal mental torture, the literal anguish and suffering every American had to go through having to deal with Trump being in office and all the drama that came with that. I mean, imagine if he would have been in office 4 more years and we had to endure it again. I mean, do you remember the moment Biden took over office and it was like all the news changed and all the trauma changed and it felt normal again? Whew. Anyway, this is not going to be no political type podcast or anything like that. I won't allow it or force anyone to be a Republican or a Democrat. I just won't allow it on this podcast. This podcast is going to go deeper than that. We're not going to force people to one side or the other and hate one side or the other. I won't let it happen. So, but anyways, we are going to end up dealing with Trump a little bit during our journey. We won't spend much time there. We'll take it into the election of 2020. President Joe Biden was elected, and right on top of that, we had to deal with COVID. And as soon as COVID hit, how did that change the world? How did that change America? How did that change the lives of average everyday Americans? And building up to that point, getting into the war with Russia and Ukraine, and now leading up to the war with Israel. What the heck is going on? Every American right now is feeling the stress, is feeling the pressure, feeling like any day now some nuke is going to literally drop on some city somewhere and everything is literally going to change forever. Who knows what we're going to face, but we feel it. You feel it behind your eyes. You feel it in your paychecks. You feel it at the grocery store. You feel it. You feel it in when you wake up. You feel it when you go to sleep. And I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about it. And if they are, they're being forced to think about it the way a Democrat thinks about it, or they're being forced to think about it the way a Republican thinks about it. And not everyone thinks that way. Not everyone eats the propaganda. Not everyone can be brainwashed, okay? And there's a lot of brainwashed Americans who are literally fumbling over themselves, jockeying for position for who thinks better. And you're not even using your own thoughts. You've just been fed what they want you to think so that you can comply and be the American they want you to be. So, whoa, let's go back to just freedom of thought and literally analyze what is happening. So we're going to take some time here. We're going to go back and we're going to discuss what has got us here. What were the events that took place that started changing the course of American history? And how did we do? How did we respond? And what was life like for Americans in that era? And who were our heroes? Who were our enemies? What did we learn from those experiences that helped get us to the point where we are now? Hey guys, just want to break in here real quick and invite you to our Patreon page. It is patreon.com/trapped in the US podcast. It helps supports the channel. It's only $10 a month. And I'm going to have a lot of different sub episodes for every single one that I post here on YouTube and everywhere else. Patreon is going to have extra episodes that are going to deal with the hidden things that it's way too hot. It's way too hot for YouTube. They'll cancel me every single time I put it up there. But on Patreon, you're going to get exclusive access to this information that I'm going to share with you guys. How these wars were funded, who were the families that were behind it, what's the secret dirt that they've been trying to hide from us all of our lives, rewriting history, and who are the people behind it. These are the people who got us here. These are the people who are controlling the narrative, the people pulling the strings. It's way too hot. Trust me, you got to come check it out on patreon.com/trapped in the US podcast. Let's get started. Okay, so America formed officially 1776, Declaration of Independence. Also the same year that the Illuminati was formed, but we're not going to get into all that right now. But anyways, America, 1776, we got George Washington, who's president. We are literally trying to establish ourselves as a country, but why? Why did we start a new country in 1776? And what did our ancestors do in their purpose for coming over here from Europe to start a new country? And if you go through the history and really study, and not just what schools tell you, but I'm a deep dive researcher, okay? So I've gone in deep over the years on this to research some of this stuff. And if you do your research, you'll find out there was a tremendous amount of oppression and revolutions that were going on all throughout the late 1600s into the 1700s. You had the French Revolution, you had the American Revolution, you had the Haitian revolutions, you had the Spanish Revolution. All these conflicts were happening over these periods of time. And if you do your research and you really study and go down deep into the history of what's there, what you find out is that there were kingdoms that were needed to be brought under the control of the Vatican, and Protestantism was a terrible pain for the Vatican, and it really angered them. So you had all these kings and wars and things that were happening, and people were just trying to be free, just trying to find a place where they can live, where they can raise their kids and their families and just be able to think for themselves and have their conscience between them and God, and not have to go through some popish Catholic filter in order to get to heaven. And so there was all these battles going on and getting through there, and people who came over from Europe were looking for freedom. And when they came over here, long story short, America was founded, like I said, in 1776, and a new country was birthed, Declaration of Independence, and all the different things contained in that declaration is really, really, really remarkable. The amount of freedoms that they just hoped and wished for and wrote in there and signed, so we can start a brand new life, have a brand new country to live that life in. Now, I hear some of you thinking right now, KB, you're not talking about the Indians. You're not sharing the full history of Aborigines and whoever else that the white man came over here and destroyed and ruined their lives in order to take over this country. Listen, I get it. I understand. That's a whole nother history for a whole nother day and a whole nother podcast. And it is real and it is legit, okay, to discuss that. But we're just not going to do that on today's podcast, okay? All right, let's continue. So we jumped right into that declaration, into the American Revolution, and that lasted all the way from 1775 all the way to 1783. The French and the Haitian revolutions went pretty much right after, uh, but it ended up coming to 1812, and we had to battle the British again and make some deals. The White House was burned down. There was a huge war that took place, the Battle of 1812. If you do your research there. But whatever deal that we made that deal to end that war and start a new life. So we still had a civil war coming in America, trying to find its way, and the end of slavery and the bravery of Abraham Lincoln, who abolished slavery, even though the powers that be and the great elites who were running slavery in those days didn't like it, didn't want it, especially in the South, and battled and didn't even tell slaves until years later in the South that they were free. It was really terrible, our history, and how all that happened. You had the cowboys battling it out. Anyways, we go all the way into the 1900s, right? We're starting to build our country. We're building railroads. We got steel being built. We got all these oligarchs here in America who are building all this industrial growth that's happening in our country, and it's helping our country grow and become a stronger nation, a more viable nation. And at the same time, it also made all those oligarchs extremely rich. We're talking about the Carnegies, we're talking about the Rockefellers, we're talking about the Rothschilds, we're talking about J.P. Morgans, E.H. Harriman. All these oligarchs had a role to play in our history and helped establish the path that we're on right now. But who pulls their strings? Who are their handlers? I digress. So World War I, also known as the Great War, started in 1914, right after the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. His murder catapulted into a war across Europe and lasted until 1918, so 4 years. During the 4-year conflict, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire fought against Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Canada, Japan, and the United States, which were known as the Allied powers. Thanks to military technologies and trench warfare, World War I saw unprecedented levels of carnage and destruction. By the time the war was over and the Allied powers had won, more than 16 million people, soldiers and civilians alike, were killed. Several new independent countries were formed, including Poland, Finland, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. Russia became known as the Soviet Union, and the Ottoman Empire officially ended. After the war, the destruction of Europe was terrible. Countries took a lot of time to recover. Germany lost a lot of its industrial power and was left in incredible debt. There was spiraling hyperinflation of the German currency, which is known as Reichsmarks. And they used to literally buy a loaf of bread for a year in savings at that point. It was terrible. Those who returned from the war, finding inequality intact, demanded their civil rights. A wave of civil rights activism for equal rights for African Americans and the passage of an amendment securing women's right to vote and having a larger role in world affairs. It also heralded the rise of conscription, mass propaganda, and the national security state in the FBI. During this post-war era, we saw the transformation of the U.S. through an economic boom, the growth of suburbs all around the country, and the birth of the Cold War. Also to note, on December 23rd, 1913, the Federal Reserve was created and signed into law by President Wilson. Also, in 1918, we had the Spanish flu. This flu was terrifying. It had more casualties than World War I, World War II, or the Korean War and Vietnam War combined. America lost 675,000 people in the Spanish flu. in 1918. Let me just stop right there for a second. Can we just talk about the resilience and the courage of the American people during this time? Man, you gotta fight through all these different revolutions and civil wars. You gotta fight through all the wild wild west and the birth of the west and the gold rushes and all the fashion things, all these changes happening in America leading up into the 1900s. And then you have World War One. Your children, your sons, your daughters are all being shipped off overseas. Your fathers are being shipped off overseas. So many of them not coming back, who spilled their blood and gave their life to defend this country. And then those who did survive and did come back, you had to try to battle the Spanish flu for 2 years and overcome all that just to continue to live and to continue to provide for your family and try to rebuild your future moving forward. I mean, I can't begin to just describe the courage and the resilience of Americans in that time and the integrity that they had and just the courage. I'm just so blown away. Even when I go to memorials and reflect around the country, different memorials like the Battle of this or the Battle of that. They're all over the country. You can, if you've traveled this country, you've seen many of them. But you just reflect on all that and you just think, of, wow, what were Americans like and what they had to go through and the courage it took for them to battle all those things and to be able to survive just to continue to keep living and moving our country forward. And those who gave their life for this country's freedoms and the impression that they gave on my parents and all of our parents growing up in the early 1900s was incredible. And I just want to stop there to honor all of those Americans who gave their life for this country during World War One and who had the courage to battle and fight and even face death representing our country and to fight for our freedoms and to see those freedoms not only continue, but our country strengthen, economically grow into the 19th century, moving into the 20th century. And I just want to give credit to them for all that they sacrificed for us to get us to this point. Thank you. Thank you for that. God bless you. So, leading out of the 20s, in this economic boom that's happening in America, we start moving into 1929, and this is the next major event as we're going down history lane here, and that's the Great Depression, which was kicked off by the stock market crash of 1929. The collapse of the world trade was due to the Smoot-Hawley tariff, government policies, bank failures, and a major panic that happened throughout the economic world, and the collapse of the money supply. There were 7 causes of the Great Depression. The speculative boom of the 1920s, which led to the stock market crash, oversupply and overproduction problems, low demand and high unemployment, missteps by the Federal Reserve, and constrained presidential response. We didn't do enough quick enough. And by the time we did try to act on what was happening, so much of the damage had already been done. And pretty much it changed the whole world. I mean, it definitely changed our country. I think everybody had to turn in their gold. You weren't allowed to have gold. Back then, you had to literally hand it over to the government. And people were living in the streets, eating whatever they could find. It was a terrible time again for our country. And somehow Americans that lost everything, didn't have money to eat, didn't have money to live, didn't have money to do anything, who survived this Great Depression, it's just incredible to me. This was a massive shock that affected countries all across the world, um, and everybody paid the price for it. It was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, and it lasted for 10 years. 10 years. It didn't get done till 1939, and that leads us really why it got out of the Great Depression was leading us into World War II. And the reason why is because of war is good for business. It's unfortunate, but it's very true. You have to have companies and factories to build the things that you need to fight a war, and that creates jobs, that creates income, and it's a huge, huge, huge machine. Which today we're seeing hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars, currently that have just gone through the military industrial complex just in the last year. And we're not even done yet because we're leading up to World War III, if not already in it as we speak. And that leads us to World War II. And when I think of World War II, my father was in World War II. A lot of our fathers and grandfathers in America today fought and gave their lives in World War II. But this is a very interesting subject because I've studied this subject. I've gone through the history books, and then I've gone deeper places to uncover things. And as we talk about the military industrial complex, and we talk about the robber barons and, the big money folks who were trying to find ways to make money, World War II was an incredible opportunity for them. For us and for normal Americans, it was a tragic, terrible time. But it basically started with Germany after World War I just being in economic shambles. And they were, their money was worthless. They couldn't buy bread. Like I said before, it would take a year's worth of savings just to buy a loaf of bread. And the terrible pain and suffering that Germany went through post World War I, leading into World War II, opened up an incredible opportunity for some of the elite people to be able to buy some of this Germany industrial stock for a knockdown price. And I'll tell you, they had the best industrial stock on the planet at that time. They just didn't have any money. Their money was literally wiped out after World War I. But in stepped some very interesting people to start buying some of that industrial stock, to start buying some of those steel mills, those factories, and to get it at a very cheap price to start building it back up. And as they continue to invest and build into Germany, someone rose up from literally obscurity to become leader of Germany and their country. We all know his name, Adolf Hitler, and his National Socialist Party. He took over Germany during this time and started to build up the army, started to build up Germany, and to build up the economy there, and to turn the minds and the hearts of every German he possibly could into doing his political will. When Hitler came into power, he smashed the nation's democratic institutions and transformed Germany into a war state, intent on conquering Europe for the benefit of the so-called Aryan race. And there's a lot of people, a lot of partners, a lot of things that led to him getting into power, and I can get into that on another episode. It's pretty crazy, but before World War II ended, you best believe there were American interests involved behind the scenes on some of those industrial stock and those factories, and also us supplying uh, different things to Germany for the war. And that's one thing you're going to learn from me. I'm not going to speak on something unless I've done the research, and I'm going to state the facts. And if you know anything about the people on the very high end of things who pull the strings, you know that they don't lose money. They bet on both sides, and they're going to win on both sides. They're going to provide and back all different parties in a war to make as much money off of that war as humanly possible. And all those people, which I'll get into, had to be in position and before Adolf Hitler could invade Poland. So that brings us to September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. On September 3rd, Great Britain and France responded by declaring war on Germany, and the USSR entered the war with Germany on June 22nd, 1941, with Operation Barbarossa and the German invasion of the Soviet Union. So why did Japan enter World War II? Well, according to history, they were faced with severe shortages of oil and other natural resources. They were getting pretty desperate, and they were driven by this ambition to displace the United States as the dominant Pacific power. So Japan decided to attack the United States and British forces in Asia and seize the resources of Southeast Asia. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, ended the debate over American intervention in both the Pacific and European theaters of World War II. The day after the attack, Congress declared war on Imperial Japan with only a single dissenting vote. World War II lasted 4 long, grueling years. It was a terrible, terrible battle between many, many nations, with America involved now, fighting Japan, fighting Adolf Hitler, and the allies that were created during that time. It was a long, grueling battle. Many millions of people were killed. There were 330,000 American soldiers who died in World War II. Eventually, the USSR, with the Allies, started overcoming Adolf Hitler and the German Nazi Party, and he was pushed into a corner. And on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler passed away, and Germany had no other recourse but to surrender, which took place on May 7th. 4 countries stepped in and assumed the administrative control of Germany. It was the United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and France. If we move ahead just a little bit further, there's still a battle going on between Japan and America. And on September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrendered because we dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war cost the lives, like I said, of more than 330,000 American soldiers. Millions of countless lives were lost in this war, and a new world order was created right after World War II. Western Europe and Asia were rebuilt through the American Marshall Plan, whereas Central and Eastern Europe fell under the Soviet sphere of influence and eventually behind the Iron Curtain. Europe was divided into a U.S.-led Western Bloc and a USSR-led Eastern Bloc. By 1948, a new form of international tension had emerged, the Cold War. This Cold War was between the United States and its allies, and the Soviet Union and its allies. And in the next 20 years, the Cold War spawned many, many tensions between the two superpowers abroad, and fears of communist subversion gripped domestic politics here at home. During this time, even though the Cold War is starting to build up tensions, think about what America was like in the 40s and the 50s, just going into the early 60s, the birth of rock and roll, what what the American family was going through. And again, think about the courage that Americans had to go through, had to face World War II, had to face the uh, Hitler down, and even just the changes that had to be made to adjust to make sure that we won that war with uh, everything on the line. All the soldiers, all the people who sacrificed, all our parents and grandparents who went through that time and went through that era, and the courage and the resilience Americans had to have. You had a lot of uh, marriages that stayed together. Divorce was a very rare thing in comparison to now these days. Um, children when they went to school, and you just think about the innocence of Americans at that time, and just the type, the era that we were living in, and just I don't want to say the purity because it was not pure per se, but the American family was, um, the American family was it was an incredible thing, just even thinking about relationships and thinking about your love for music and seeing all these things just exploding, creativity exploding, art create exploding, movies exploding, um, and just the success of all those things. And we're starting to see now um, those portray into society the wholesomeness of the American family in America in that time, and the movies that were coming out during that time, was just incredible. And we had a tremendous economic boom again and a growth again coming out of World War II. And this is going to lead us, uh, with those things coming against the Cold War, to November 22nd, 1963, and the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, I'm not going to get into this on this episode. I think it would be best to start this on episode 2. But in reflection of everything we just talked about, there's no way to go forward or even know where we are presently as Americans and know where we're going to go forward until we understood our past and went through a little bit of history. Okay. So I appreciate you guys listening with me. We all know this, we understand, but I had to go back and go through it to get us to where we need to be, because we started seeing some tremendous changes to America internally, not just, from world wars and other stuff, but I'm talking internally. Things just started um, going bad with the assassination of President Kennedy. And I'm going to dive deep into this on the next episode. I hope you come back on the next episode and listen. I'm going to share some information that a lot of people know, but I'm also going to share some information that very few people know about, because, like I said, I'm a deep diver and I go really deep into this stuff. And I've researched and researched and researched and researched probably hundreds of hours on the Kennedy assassination. So we're going to go through that. We're going to go through from that moment on and take us up through September 11th, 2001. That'll probably be episode 3. That'll take us September 1 all the way up until COVID. And then we're going to get to our present moment, and we're going to continue this podcast from there. And I'm telling you, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be crazy. We're going to watch the unfolding events of World War III in real time, and I'm going to I'm going to break it down from my unique perspective, and I'm also going to tie in things that are happening with prophetically a timetable that God has laid out for us, and we're literally seeing those things come to pass. And I just want to give everybody who's listening to this channel not just awareness. understanding that you have a community here where we all, as Americans, are going through the same thing. We all believe something different. We all have a different perspective. That's okay. And I welcome all that. But for us to truly understand who we are, where we're going, we got to break down all the past, the truth, the lies, the deceptions, so that we can understand how in the heck we got here. How do we understand what is happening now, and how do we plan for the future with the world heading into World War III? I'm really happy you guys tuned in and listened to this episode. Come back again on the next episode too, and we're going to break down the Kennedy assassination, and I guarantee you, you're going to learn some things you never knew. All right? And you're listening to Trapped in the U.S.